When Emperor Charles III of Austria died in exile in 1922, Europe's last Habsburg monarch left behind not an empire but 8 children. They were heirs without a throne, raised between mountain villas, boarding schools, and borrowed palaces. Some became statesmen, others lived quietly in exile. One helped unite Europe, another worked incognito in New York, and others married into today's Belgian and Liechtenstein royal families. From the crown prince who sat in the European Parliament to the daughter born 2 months after her father's death, this is the complete story of Charles I's children, their births, their lives, their marriages, and how their blood still runs through Europe's royal houses. The Great War shattered more than battlefields. It demolished dynasties that had ruled for centuries. In November 1918, Emperor Charles I of Austria-Hungary, heir to a realm stretching from the Alps to the Carpathians, found himself emperor of nothing. He refused to formally abdicate, insisting he was merely stepping aside from affairs of state. But the distinction mattered little. The Habsburg monarchy was dead, and Charles was now a statesman without a state. With his wife, Empress Zita of Bourbon-Parma, Charles had 8 children born between 1912 and 1922. The eldest, Otto, was just 6 when his father lost the throne. The youngest, Elizabeth, would be born 2 months after Charles died in exile on the Portuguese island of Madeira. The family's exile began in Switzerland, where they lived in modest circumstances at Warteg Castle. Charles's 2 failed attempts to reclaim the Hungarian crown in 1921 led to his banishment to Madeira, where he died of pneumonia in April 1922, aged just 34. Empress Zita was left to raise 8 children alone, maintaining their imperial dignity while adapting to a world that had no place for emperors. What followed was perhaps the most remarkable chapter in Habsburg history, not the story of how a dynasty fell, but how it learned to rise again. Otto Franz Joseph Karl Ludwig Maria von Habsburg was born on November 20, 1912, in the Blau Kirche at Reichenau Palace near Vienna. As the eldest son of the heir apparent, he was born into certainty. He would one day rule the vast Austro-Hungarian Empire. That certainty lasted exactly 6 years. When Emperor Franz Joseph died in 1916, Otto's father became Charles I, and 4-year-old Otto became crown prince. But by November 1918, there was no crown left to inherit. Otto's childhood was defined by exile and education. In Switzerland, Zita ensured her children received instruction befitting their rank, even if that rank no longer officially existed. Otto learned German, Hungarian, Croatian, English, French, and Spanish, languages of the empire that was and the world that would be. At age 14, Otto was sent to the Jesuit College of Stella Matutina in Austria, then later to the University of Louvain in Belgium. His education emphasized not just royal protocol, but practical skills, law, economics, political science. Zita was preparing her children for a world where titles meant less than capability. Otto earned his doctorate in political and social sciences in 1935, writing his dissertation on agricultural reform in the Danube region. Even in academic work, he remained focused on the lands his family once ruled. For decades, Otto maintained his claim to the Austrian and Hungarian thrones, styling himself as Otto I of Austria and Otto IV of Hungary. He established the Habsburg court in exile, first in Belgium, then in Bavaria after World War II. But Otto was no mere nostalgic pretender. He became a passionate advocate for European integration, seeing it as the peaceful successor to the multi-ethnic empire his family had once ruled. In 1961, he renounced all claims to the Austrian throne, finally accepting the republic that had replaced his inheritance. In 1979, Otto achieved something remarkable. He was elected to the European Parliament as a representative of Bavaria. The former heir to the Austrian throne became a champion of European democracy, serving until 1999. Throughout his parliamentary career, Otto advocated for Central European integration, helping to shape policy toward the former communist bloc. He was instrumental in supporting the peaceful revolutions of 1989, particularly in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, lands where his ancestors had once reigned. In 1951, Otto married Princess Regina of Saxe-Meiningen in a ceremony that mixed Habsburg tradition with post-war pragmatism. The wedding took place in Nancy, France, attended by dethroned royalty from across Europe. Otto and Regina had 7 children, continuing the Habsburg line into the modern era. Their eldest son, Karl, was born in 1961 and maintains the family's traditional claims, though more as historical custodian than political pretender. The children pursued diverse careers: politics, business, journalism, and academia. They represent a new generation of Habsburgs, comfortable with both their heritage and their role as European citizens rather than imperial rulers. Otto lived to see the European Union he had helped create expand to include much of the former Austro-Hungarian Empire. Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia all became EU members during his lifetime. He died on July 4, 2011, aged 98, having transformed from crown prince of a fallen empire to elder statesman of a united Europe. His funeral in Vienna was attended by leaders from across the continent, not as subjects honoring an emperor, but as colleagues paying respect to a fellow European. Otto's body was interred in the imperial crypt in Vienna, the traditional resting place of Habsburg rulers. But more significantly, his heart was separately buried in the Hungarian abbey of Pannonhalma, symbol of his enduring connection to all the peoples his family had once governed. Of all Charles I's children, Otto perhaps stayed truest to his father's vision of a peaceful, multi-ethnic Central Europe. Where Charles had failed to preserve the old empire, Otto succeeded in helping create a new one, voluntary, democratic, and free. Archduchess Adelheid Maria Rainiera Elizabeth Dominica was born on January 3, 1914, at the Hofburg Palace in Vienna. She entered the world just months before the assassination in Sarajevo would trigger the war that would end her family's reign. As the eldest daughter, Adelheid often served as a bridge between her brothers and younger sisters. In the close-knit exile household, she developed a reputation for intelligence and scholarly inclination that would define her entire life. Unlike Otto, who was groomed for leadership, or her younger brothers, who would pursue careers in politics and military service, Adelheid was drawn to intellectual pursuits. Even as a child, she preferred books to social gatherings, academic discussions to court ceremonials. Adelheid received her early education from private tutors, but her true passion lay in historical research. She became particularly interested in genealogy and the history of European noble families, work that would occupy much of her adult life. She spent years researching in European archives, documenting not just Habsburg family history, but the complex web of relationships that had bound Europe's aristocracy together for centuries. Her work was meticulous, scholarly, and increasingly recognized by academic institutions. In an era when marriage was still considered the primary role for women of her background, Adelheid made an unusual choice. She remained single throughout her life. This was not for lack of suitors. Several European princes showed interest in the intelligent Habsburg princess. Instead, Adelheid chose independence. She dedicated herself to preserving family history and supporting charitable causes, particularly those related to education and historical preservation. Her decision was respected by her family, who came to rely on her as the keeper of Habsburg traditions and memory. Adelheid's most significant contribution was her systematic documentation of Habsburg genealogy and history. Working with various European archives, she helped preserve records that might otherwise have been lost in the chaos of 2 world wars. Her research became invaluable to historians studying Central European nobility and the complex political relationships of the pre-war era. She was consulted by universities, museums, and historical societies across Europe. Throughout the long decades of exile, Adelheid remained close to her mother, Empress Zita, often serving as her companion and assistant. When the family settled in Switzerland, Adelheid helped manage the household and maintained correspondence with Habsburg supporters across Europe. She also became the beloved aunt to her siblings' children, introducing them to their family history and ensuring they understood their heritage, even as they adapted to modern European life. Adelheid lived a long and productive life, dying on October 3, 1971, at age 57. She never sought public attention, but her quiet scholarship and dedication to family history made her an invaluable link between the imperial past and the democratic present. She was buried in the Habsburg family plot in Switzerland, surrounded by the family she had served so faithfully. Her papers and research were donated to academic institutions, ensuring her scholarly work would continue to benefit future historians. Adelheid embodied her father's intellectual curiosity and devotion to duty, albeit in a different form. Where Charles had tried to govern, Adelheid chose to preserve and document. Her careful scholarship ensured that the Habsburg story would be told accurately, not as imperial propaganda, but as honest history. Archduke Robert Karl Ludwig Salvator Franz Xaver was born on February 8, 1915, at the height of World War I. Unlike his older siblings, Robert would become the dynastic bridge between the fallen Austrian Empire and the surviving monarchies of modern Europe. Robert's early childhood in exile was marked by the constant movement that characterized the Habsburg family's life after 1918. From Switzerland to brief periods in various European countries, he learned adaptability from an early age. Like his brothers, Robert received a multilingual education, but he showed particular aptitude for languages and diplomacy. His tutors noted his ability to navigate between different cultural contexts, a skill that would prove essential in his later life. Despite being a prince without a country, Robert was determined to serve in military capacity. During World War II, he served with distinction in the British Army, fighting against Nazi Germany, the very regime that had incorporated his ancestral homeland into the Third Reich. His service record showed courage and competence, but also the complex identity of a Habsburg in wartime, fighting for democracy against the totalitarian regime that had occupied Austria, yet still maintaining his imperial heritage and claims. After the war, Robert established strong connections with Belgium, a country that had welcomed many Habsburg exiles. Belgium's own complex history with monarchy and democracy made it sympathetic to displaced royalty seeking new roles in post-war Europe. Robert became involved in various business and diplomatic ventures, often serving as an unofficial liaison between Austria and Belgium. His work helped strengthen economic ties between the two countries and facilitated Austrian integration into European institutions. In 1953, Robert married Princess Margherita of Savoy-Aosta, daughter of the Duke of Aosta and a member of the Italian royal family. The marriage united two of Europe's most prominent exiled dynasties. The wedding was attended by representatives of numerous European royal houses, symbolizing the enduring connections between displaced aristocracy. But it was also a modern union, based on genuine affection rather than purely dynastic considerations. Robert and Margherita had 5 children, each of whom would find their own path in modern Europe. Their children represent a new generation of Habsburgs, comfortable with their heritage but fully integrated into contemporary European society. The eldest, Archduke Lorenz, would make perhaps the most significant dynastic marriage of the late 20th century, marrying Princess Astrid of Belgium in 1984. This union brought Habsburg blood directly into a reigning European royal house. Through marriage alliances and inheritance, Robert became connected to the Austria-Este line, one of the cadet branches of the Habsburg family. This connection would prove significant for his descendants, particularly in maintaining claims to various European titles and properties. The Austria-Este connection also linked Robert's family to the House of Bourbon-Parma through his mother, creating a complex web of relationships that spanned European royalty. These connections would prove valuable in the post-war period as European integration proceeded. Throughout his adult life, Robert balanced his dynastic responsibilities with practical business activities. He was involved in various commercial ventures, particularly those that strengthened economic ties between Austria, Belgium, and other European countries. His diplomatic background and royal connections made him a valuable intermediary in international business, particularly during the sensitive period of European economic integration in the 1960s and 1970s. Robert died on February 7, 1996, just one day before his 81st birthday. He had lived to see his children successfully integrated into European society and his eldest son married into a reigning royal house. His funeral was attended by representatives of both the Belgian royal family and Austrian government, symbolizing his success in bridging the gap between Habsburg heritage and modern European reality. Robert perhaps best embodied his father's vision of reconciliation and service. Where Charles had failed to preserve the old order, Robert succeeded in finding a place for Habsburg values within the new European framework. His military service, diplomatic work, and successful family life demonstrated that imperial heritage could coexist with democratic citizenship. Archduke Felix, Friedrich, August, Maria vom Sieg, Franz Joseph, Peter Karl Anton, Robert Otto, Pius Michael Benedict, Sebastian Ignatius Marcus was born on May 31, 1916, just as his grandfather, Emperor Franz Joseph, was dying and Europe was tearing itself apart in the Great War. Felix would become the most geographically adventurous of Charles I's children, eventually making his life across the Atlantic in a way that no previous Habsburg had ever attempted. Like his brothers, Felix received a comprehensive European education, moving between schools in Switzerland, Belgium, and Austria as political circumstances permitted. He showed particular aptitude for modern languages and business studies. Felix's education was deliberately practical. Empress Zita, learning from the fate of other displaced royal families, ensured her children could support themselves through professional skills rather than relying solely on traditional aristocratic income sources. Felix trained in various business disciplines, including finance and international trade. His tutors noted his particular interest in the emerging American business methods that were beginning to influence European commerce. When World War II began, Felix, like his brother Robert, was determined to fight against Nazi Germany. However, Felix chose to serve with American forces rather than British, reflecting his growing interest in the United States. His service record shows deployment in the European theater, where he fought to liberate the very territories his family had once ruled. The irony was not lost on him, a Habsburg prince helping to establish American-style democracy in Central Europe. After the war, Felix made a decision that shocked European royal circles. He emigrated to the United States, settling in New York City. For a Habsburg prince to choose America over Europe was almost unprecedented. Felix established himself in international business using his European connections and multilingual abilities to facilitate trade between America and Europe. His royal background opened doors, but his business acumen kept them open. He deliberately kept a low profile, preferring to be known as a successful businessman rather than an exiled prince. This approach allowed him to build genuine professional relationships without the complications of royal protocol. In 1952, Felix married Archduchess Anna Eugenie of Arenberg in a ceremony that blended Habsburg tradition with American practicality. The wedding took place in New York, attended by both European royalty and American business associates. Felix and Anna Eugenie had 7 children, all raised as both Austrian aristocrats and American citizens. The children were educated to appreciate their Habsburg heritage while fully embracing American opportunities. His children pursued diverse careers in American society, business, academia, the arts. While maintaining connections to their European heritage, they represent perhaps the most successfully Americanized branch of the Habsburg family. Throughout his career, Felix served as an unofficial cultural and business ambassador between America and Europe. His unique background allowed him to understand both worlds and facilitate connections between them. During the Cold War, his work became particularly valuable as Austria navigated neutrality between East and West. Felix could provide American perspectives on European issues while offering European insights to American partners. Felix died on September 6, 2011, having lived to age 95. He had successfully transplanted Habsburg values to American soil while maintaining his Austrian heritage and family connections. His funeral reflected his dual life, conducted with Habsburg traditions but attended by colleagues from American business and Austrian diplomacy. His children continue to bridge the Atlantic, maintaining connections to both their American lives and European heritage. Felix embodied his father's adaptability and openness to new ideas. Where Charles had tried to modernize an ancient empire, Felix succeeded in transplanting imperial values to a democratic republic, proving that Habsburg principles could flourish in the New World. Archduke Karl Ludwig, Maria, Franz Joseph, Michael Gabriel Antonius Robert Stephan Pius Gregor Ignatius Marcus Daviano was born on March 10, 1918, in Baden bei Wien, just as the Austro-Hungarian Empire was entering its final months. Karl Ludwig entered the world as the old order was dying. By the time he could walk, his father had lost his throne and the family was in Swiss exile. His entire childhood would be shaped by the reality of being a soldier without a war, a prince without a realm. From his earliest years, Karl Ludwig showed an inclination toward military life. In the Habsburg tradition, younger sons often pursued military careers, and Karl Ludwig embraced this path even without an imperial army to serve. His education emphasized military science, strategy, and the warrior traditions of his ancestors. He studied at various military academies across Europe, learning the professional skills of modern warfare while maintaining the honor code of imperial officers. Instructors noted his serious demeanor and dedication to military discipline. Unlike some of his siblings who adapted readily to civilian life, Karl Ludwig remained focused on the martial traditions that had defined Habsburg men for centuries. When World War II erupted, Karl Ludwig faced the same choice as his brothers Robert and Felix: how to serve in a war that would determine the fate of his ancestral lands. He chose to fight with the American forces, serving in the European theater. His service record shows exemplary conduct and leadership under fire. Fellow officers remembered him as quietly competent, never trading on his royal background, but earning respect through professional military skill. The war's end found him in a peculiar position. He had helped liberate Austria, but there was no role for a Habsburg prince in the Democratic Republic that emerged from Nazi occupation. The post-war period was perhaps the most difficult for Karl Ludwig. His military training and aristocratic background were poorly suited to the civilian careers his siblings pursued. Unlike Otto's political path or Felix's business success, Karl Ludwig struggled to find his place. He moved between different European countries, never quite settling anywhere permanently. His military precision and formal manner, assets in wartime, seemed out of place in the rapidly changing post-war world. In 1950, Karl Ludwig married Yolande de Ligne, a member of an ancient Belgian noble family. The marriage brought him some stability and connection to the Belgian aristocratic community that had welcomed Habsburg exiles. The couple had 4 children, whom Karl Ludwig raised with strict discipline and clear expectations about duty and honor. His parenting style reflected his military background and aristocratic values. Unlike some of his siblings who encouraged their children to fully integrate into modern society, Karl Ludwig maintained more traditional approaches, ensuring his children understood their heritage and obligations. As he aged, Karl Ludwig found his role as keeper of family traditions and military heritage. He became the family authority on Habsburg military history and protocol, consulted whenever formal ceremonies required proper traditional conduct. He also maintained connections with veterans organizations and military historical societies, sharing his knowledge of Habsburg military traditions and European military history. Karl Ludwig died on December 11, 2007, aged 89. His death marked the end of the generation that had personally known the Habsburg monarchy and lived through its fall. His funeral was conducted with full military honors, attended by representatives of various European armies and veterans organizations. The ceremony reflected his lifelong dedication to military service and honor. Karl Ludwig perhaps most directly inherited his father's sense of duty and service, though he struggled more than his siblings to find outlets for these qualities in the democratic age. His rigid adherence to military values represented both the strength and limitation of Habsburg traditions in the modern world. Archduke Rudolf Karl Salvator Maria Antonius Dominicus was born on September 5, 1919, in Hertenstein, Switzerland, making him the first of Charles I's children to be born in exile. His birth came during a brief period of hope when the family still believed restoration might be possible. Rudolf's birth in Switzerland symbolized the new reality for the Habsburg family. They were no longer Austrian or Hungarian royalty, but European exiles dependent on the hospitality of neutral nations. Rudolf received the comprehensive education typical of Habsburg children in exile, but his parents ensured he also learned practical skills that would serve him in civilian life. Unlike his older brothers who were groomed for leadership or military service, Rudolf was prepared for a more private existence. His education emphasized languages, business, and practical administration. Rudolf showed particular aptitude for detail-oriented work and was noted for his methodical approach to problems. He completed apprenticeships in several business fields, learning the practical skills of commerce and administration that would support him throughout his life. In 1953, Rudolf married Ksenia Chernycheva-Besobrasova, a Russian noble who had also been born into exile. Their marriage represented the union of two displaced aristocratic families adapting to modern Europe. The couple had 4 children before the marriage ended in divorce in 1963, an event that caused some scandal in traditional Habsburg circles, but reflected changing social norms of the 1960s. Rudolf's second marriage in 1971 to Anna Gabriele Prinzessin von Wrede was more successful and lasted until his death. This marriage brought him additional stepchildren and a more stable family life. Rudolf's 2 marriages and complex family situation reflected the challenges faced by displaced royalty in adapting to contemporary social norms while maintaining traditional values. Unlike his more prominent siblings, Rudolf pursued a deliberately low-profile professional life. He worked in various business capacities, often in positions that utilized his linguistic skills and cultural knowledge. His work often involved facilitating business relationships between different European countries, using his background and connections to bridge cultural differences in international commerce. Rudolf's approach to business was methodical and reliable rather than flashy or innovative. He built a reputation for trustworthiness and discretion that served him well in both personal and professional relationships. Within the Habsburg family, Rudolf often served as a reliable organizer and coordinator for family events and ceremonies. His attention to detail and diplomatic skills made him valuable in maintaining family unity across geographic distances. He frequently served as a liaison between different branches of the family, helping to coordinate communications and organize gatherings that brought together Habsburgs scattered across Europe and America. Throughout his life, Rudolf maintained involvement with various charitable organizations, particularly those focused on helping displaced persons and refugees, causes close to his heart given his own family's experience of exile. His charitable work was conducted quietly, without publicity or fanfare. Rudolf preferred to contribute through practical assistance rather than high-profile patronage. Rudolf died on May 15, 2010, aged 90. His life exemplified quiet dignity and dutiful service without seeking public recognition or glory. His funeral was a private family affair, reflecting his preference for discretion over ceremony. The service emphasized his role as devoted family member and reliable friend rather than his imperial heritage. Rudolf embodied his father's sense of duty but expressed it through private service rather than public leadership. His methodical approach to responsibilities and his dedication to family unity reflected Charles I's own values adapted to a more modest scope of influence. Archduchess Charlotte Marie Adelaide. Frederica was born on March 1, 1921, in Hertenstein, Switzerland, the penultimate child of Charles I and Zita. She would become perhaps the most socially progressive of all the Habsburg children. Born into exile, Charlotte grew up with a keen awareness of social inequality and human suffering. Her childhood exposure to the struggles of displaced persons and refugees would profoundly shape her adult choices. Charlotte received the standard Habsburg education in languages and culture, but she also showed early interest in social work and progressive causes, interests that were somewhat unusual for a princess of her generation. Unlike her siblings, who pursued traditional aristocratic careers, Charlotte trained specifically in social work and assistance to disadvantaged populations. Her education included practical training in casework, community organization, and social advocacy. Her instructors noted her genuine commitment to social justice and her ability to connect with people from all backgrounds, skills that would serve her well in her chosen profession. In the 1950s, Charlotte made a remarkable decision. She emigrated to the United States to work as a professional social worker in New York City. For a Habsburg princess to pursue social work in America was almost unprecedented. Charlotte deliberately adopted a low profile, often working under an assumed name to avoid the complications that her royal background might create with clients and colleagues. Her work focused on assisting immigrants and refugees, populations she understood from personal experience. She specialized in helping displaced Europeans adapt to American society and navigate complex bureaucratic systems. In 1956, Charlotte married Duke Georg Alexander of Mecklenburg, a German noble who shared her commitment to social service. Their wedding was deliberately modest, reflecting their shared values rather than dynastic considerations. The couple had 3 children, whom they raised with strong emphasis on social responsibility and public service. Unlike some Habsburg descendants who emphasized their royal heritage, Charlotte taught her children to value contribution over status. Her parenting style reflected her professional social work training, emphasis on empathy, community involvement, and practical problem-solving rather than traditional aristocratic privileges. Charlotte's professional work earned recognition from social service organizations and community groups. She was particularly noted for her innovative approaches to helping immigrant families integrate into American society. Her colleagues remembered her as exceptionally dedicated and skilled, with particular ability to understand complex family dynamics and cultural barriers faced by newcomers to America. She remained active in professional development throughout her career, contributing to best practices in social work and refugee assistance. Despite her American career and progressive values, Charlotte maintained strong connections to her family and heritage. She regularly attended family gatherings and helped maintain communication between widely scattered siblings. She served as a bridge between the family's imperial past and their contemporary roles, helping younger generations understand their heritage while encouraging them to contribute meaningfully to modern society. After retirement from professional social work, Charlotte continued community involvement through volunteer activities and charitable organizations. She remained in the United States, where she had built her life and career. Her later years were spent with her children and grandchildren, who had grown up as fully integrated American citizens while maintaining awareness of their European heritage. Charlotte died on July 23, 1989, aged 68. Her death was noted by social service organizations and immigrant advocacy groups, as well as by Habsburg family members. Her funeral reflected her dual identity, Habsburg family traditions combined with recognition of her professional contributions to American social work. Charlotte perhaps best embodied her father's concern for the welfare of all his subjects. Where Charles had tried to care for millions through imperial governance, Charlotte succeeded in helping hundreds through direct personal service, a more intimate but equally meaningful expression of Habsburg ideals. Archduchess Elizabeth, Charlotte, Alfonsa, Christina Theresia Antonia, Josepha, Roberta, Otonia Francisca, Isabella. Pia Marcus Daviano was born on May 31, 1922 in Castro, Spain, 2 months after her father's death in Madeira. Elizabeth entered the world as an orphan, never knowing the father whose death had made European headlines just weeks before her birth. Her arrival brought both joy and sorrow to the grieving Habsburg family. Elizabeth's birth completed the family of 8, but under the most tragic circumstances. Empress Zita, widowed at 39, now faced raising 8 children alone while maintaining their imperial dignity in exile. Elizabeth's childhood was unique among the Habsburg children. While her older siblings remembered the imperial court, the family's fall, and their father's presence, Elizabeth knew only exile and her mother's stories of better times. Raised largely by her mother and older siblings, Elizabeth developed a close relationship with the entire family. Each sibling took some responsibility for her education and upbringing, making her childhood a collective family project. Her education followed the Habsburg pattern but was gentler than her siblings, perhaps reflecting both her status as the youngest and her mother's exhaustion after decades of managing exile and loss. Elizabeth came of age in the 1930s and 1940s as Europe faced new totalitarian threats. Unlike her older siblings who remembered imperial stability, Elizabeth's formative years were shaped by depression, war, and uncertainty. During World War II, Elizabeth participated in refugee assistance and war relief efforts, continuing the family tradition of service but in a thoroughly modern context. In 1949, Elizabeth married Prince Heinrich of Liechtenstein, bringing Habsburg blood into one of Europe's few surviving sovereign principalities. The marriage was both a love match and a strategic alliance between 2 prominent Catholic houses. The wedding was attended by European royalty and Habsburg family members, representing a moment of joy and tradition amid the post-war reconstruction of Europe. Elizabeth and Heinrich had 5 children, continuing both Habsburg and Liechtenstein bloodlines. Their children grew up as citizens of one of Europe's most stable and prosperous small nations. As a member of the Liechtenstein royal family, Elizabeth finally found the stable court life that had been denied to her as a child. She participated actively in the principality's ceremonial and charitable functions. Her role allowed her to experience the traditional royal life her siblings had been denied, albeit on a much smaller scale than the Habsburg Empire her father had lost. Through her marriage and children, Elizabeth ensured that Habsburg blood continues to flow in one of Europe's remaining sovereign monarchies. Her descendants are part of the Liechtenstein succession. Elizabeth lived to see her children and grandchildren fully integrated into European society while maintaining their royal heritage. She bridged the gap between the fallen Habsburg Empire and contemporary European monarchy. Elizabeth died on January 6, 1993, aged 70. Her death marked another step in the transition from imperial memory to modern reality for the Habsburg family. Her funeral was attended by both Liechtenstein royalty and Habsburg family members, symbolizing her role in connecting the family's past to Europe's present. Though Elizabeth never knew her father, she perhaps most successfully achieved the stability and integration he had sought for his family. Through her marriage into Liechtenstein royalty, she found the honored place in European society that Charles had lost, proving that Habsburg values could survive and flourish even in drastically changed circumstances. From the ruins of empire came not emperors but citizens. Otto in the Parliament, Robert in Belgium, Charlotte in New York, Elizabeth in Liechtenstein. Their paths trace a dynasty's quiet rebirth. A century after Charles I's death, his children's descendants sit in modern parliaments and royal houses, living proof that Europe's history never truly ends. It simply changes form. The Habsburg line continues, no longer ruling empires, but serving democracy, no longer commanding subjects, but contributing as citizens to the Europe their ancestors helped shape.